The streak is over. Abhimanyu Mishra had 71 games without a loss. He hadn't lost since the last year, the youth championship, a full year without any loss. 71 games, only winning the games or drawing. And finally, yesterday against Hans Niemann in the fifth round of the youth championship, he finally lost again. So Niemann was the end strike, the strike ending, or the end strike ending, because he bet when he had many games unbeatable. He told that the last year he bet maybe I don't remember, but I thought that Lanier, who was many games unbeaten, and Niemann got the streak. And this time the league team was Abhimanyu Mishra. So let's analyze again when the Mishra streak. Apart with the victory, Anand says Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana to fight for the lead of the youth championship. Okay, Niemann opens with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Nowadays the Italian was maybe more employed than the Spanish, mostly to avoid the Marshall, Berlin, Open Sicilian, many lines who ends in a draw. The Italian is more to play. It's not an advantage for a while, but it's just to play a complex game. Okay, bishop c5, so castle. So castle, knight f6, d3, d6, c3. All of this was normal. So castle, knight b2. In the player position, I always place a5 to not allow white to take space with before and to convert the bishop to e7. Especially first to not allow before and to have the square for the bishop. But okay, here there are many ways to play. A6 was the other to go to a7 too. But Arimandu chooses bishop b6. That's not my favorite move in this position. Bishop b3, knight e7. Black is making his typical plan of pass with the knight to e6, d7, and then play c6, d5. Placing the knight on g6, that's the black typical plan, followed by rook e8 and this type of things. Okay, so Niemann just decided to just take the bishop. He said, okay, you didn't play e6, you didn't play e5, so I just going to take your bishop. Sorry. And now black cannot play or a6 or a5 because knight c6, knight take e6, and you should take with the c1, white is completely better. You should have the option of recapture with the a1. Okay, knight g6, rook e1, rook e8, normal moves, bishop c2, c6, and both players are playing normally. Niemann finally take the bishop because if you didn't take in this card, no, black is going to go to c7. If for example you play h3, no black is playing bishop e7 and no, you are never going to take the bishop. That's the reason finally Niemann takes the bishop on b6. And I think that white is slightly better here because of the bishop player advantage. Of course, black has the knight well placed and is going to play d5. But okay, Niemann said the same in the interview. Niemann in the interview said that he felt so comfortable with the bishop play and that he ready to put pressure. Here, take with the queen was another possibility. a4, a5, bishop e3, queen d8, break with d4, bishop d4, h5, bishop h5, bishop d5, knight f4. This is the line that leaves the machine. But okay, take with the pawn was completely possible. Still d4, plus with breakthrough, that's the white plan. On the whole position, of course, white first place on d3, but the full idea is in one moment can break with d4. Okay, d5 will move. Bishop d4 here was another possibility. So doesn't matter if you give one bishop because you have to give the other. So you have lost the bishop pair, so doesn't matter if you give another bishop. h3 takes space, and here we move d5. If you got breakthrough of black, if he takes, the idea is c4, he moves and she takes d5. By the way, the position is so complex, I understand that black didn't choose that because it's not clear the position. And bishop d5 was interesting too. He takes d4 and trade everything and just take on d4. And okay, the white pawn structure was slightly better, of course. But b5 was fine. And here Niemann just played h3, typical move, just covering the g4 square. This move used to be played early in the Italians, but okay, in this specific game doesn't matter. H3 here was Also no. Okay. D takes, I analyze a little bit d takes, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop e3, bishop e6, a3 was another possibility, entering just in the enemy. But okay, a3 was fine, a6, a3, bishop d7, bishop e3, everything normal until here. Was playing so normal. All the typical moves just developing the pieces. Here, if the machine says this straight move, he takes before was here. Okay, white cannot take with the pawn because there is 4 points hanging, so he should take with the queen, queen c7, and rook e1, and the machine just defend with rook e6. Straight different in my opinion. Okay, now maybe d5 is coming. No, sorry, no. If bishop e3, you can just take on e4 here. Yes, you can just take on e4. Oh, sorry. You have the tactic c5 followed by c4, and the bishop is well played on b3. But in general, a place like that, the pieces with black can look strange, but if you start to analyze, it's true that now the root of a8 is coming to e8, so maybe black is fine here. But that's the way that defends the machine. Okay, queen c7, completely normal move. Here Niemann plays knight d2 with wood, queen d2 followed by rook a8, a1 was the plan, knight d2, and Abhimanyu Mishra. I don't know how to pronounce the name, Abhimanyu Mishra. Finally breaks on d5, good move. And here Niemann says a little bit giving his opponent a pleasant position. He takes d5 was slightly better, he takes on e5, queen takes bishop d4, normal, queen f4, but here was the right moment to just take on d5. Open the center and open the position for the bishop. After d3, this move was slightly strange because queen d6, and here the h3 pawn is hanging. Of course, Niemann has concrete ideas, but they are not the best. Here f4 was slightly better. If, if no, I'm not sure. Both moves are equal. F4 and bishop takes f6. But F4 was slightly different. Because the problem of bishop a6 is that you will open the opportunity of sacrifice a piece against your king. But for example, here F4, knight d4, you should take with the bishop and take with the knight, the win attempt against the queen. But okay, the position is equal because the white king now is so exposed. And d takes and you lost the bishop pair with white. If d takes, just take here and take and queen 5 and the position is equal. Bishop f6 is a good move too. Queen takes f4 and here Mira reacts in a very active way, just sacrificing a piece for 2 points. But okay, the e3 pawn is hanging and the white king is exposed, so it's going to be 3 pawns for the piece, which the resisting material apart of the exposed king. And after 3 queens in an ending, the 3 pawns have more value. So white have no choices, or white play with the open king, or he 3 queens where the pawns take more value. So black has enough counterplay for the bit. 22, and here was better take on e3 clearly. I don't know why Mira take on e4 here. The bishop e3 and why cannot take on d5? Maybe e5 and I don't know, maybe not because e5. No, sorry. You have queen e3 here. So I don't know why he doesn't take on h3. After here, queen f4 was the best, just queen d5, king h2. Here, queen h5, you can play like this, or with bishop d4 here. But all the time it looks like d takes e4 was an useful move. But okay, black is still in the game, of course. But this is maybe the first mistake of the game in 24 moves. The first 24 moves, both players are playing well, making a correct set, but d takes e4 looks like a mistake. Knight takes e4, bishop takes h3, and okay, Niemann decides to trade queens because his king is open, so he has to trade queens. 1 second, I'm going to drink water. Right. And queen f2, trading queens, of course, you have your king so exposed. The only problem, okay, for queen f2 was the best move, but the queens in the game, there is more value. Rook a8, and here Niemann plays the natural knight d6, because of course, black cannot take everything because it's checkmate on the a rank. But king e3 was stronger because if black goes back to c8, of course, knight d6. But if black goes to a6, you have the extra option of knight c5. Bishop c8, rook takes, and a4. This was interesting for white. But okay, knight e6 was fine, rook e1, b6, bishop e5. And now, Mirra should decide which piece he takes. He can take or the bishop, entering in this position of rook and knight, and 3 points against rook and 6 points. Okay, the mathematics is equal. Or king f8, just taking the knight and entering the same position, but giving away the bishop instead of the knight. And okay, the machine say that both positions are the same, the say both positions are 0-0, but I think that in practical they are maybe easier to defend the position against the knight than the position against the bishop. Because, okay, it's true that the bishop used to be a bad defender against the pawns, but in this specific position, I think that the bishop is going to be slightly better because there are pawns in both sides, there are no central pawns who used to make bad the bishop. The bishop used to like to play against pawns in both sides. So that's true that the bishop used to be bad to defend pawns, but in this specific position that there are pawns in both sides and no central pawns, I think that the bishop is a best defender. So for that reason, I prefer just this move bishop take f5, f5. Here so it's not clear, of course. It's debatable position. It's not clear. Both captures have his reasons, but I prefer this a little bit. But okay, the machine says that both moves are fine. But okay, let's analyze this a little bit. Knight f5, c5. Of course, if black managed to trade all the queenside pawns, he has zero options to lose. Before, good move. Here h5, rook e5, d6, knight e7, king e7, take, rook e2. Okay, here I was king e1, of course. Maybe advance with the king was better. But okay, king e1, of course, sample line. Rook e2, rook e5, rook e3. Okay, now maybe this position is not easy to evaluate, but the math says 0-0. You can think that black is losing because the c pawn is going to run, but the machine say that black has enough with the inside pawns to make the draw. I believe. But okay, Mira decides to play king f8, normal move, and it should be equal. Bishop h3, rook b6, rook b4, g6, good move. The correct plan was play with f5, no with h5. The correct plan is g6, f5, king 7, and now f5, good plan. c4, okay, black, of course, you didn't want to trade pawns with white, but that's necessary to create a pass pawn in the queen side. Rook b4, rook b3. Here he first made this check, but he can just take here and play king d6. But okay, this check is not horrible. King e1, another check, and he finally takes here, rook here, and king d6. King d2, d5, good move, advancing the pawns. Rook b8, d4, another good move, rook h8. And here comes the first important mistake of the game in the move 42. That is talked very well about both players, that they are playing like not perfectly game, but a game without mistakes until the move 42. So that's a great game. Here, Abhimanyu Mishra decides to defend the a6 pawn, which is a huge mistake. So he decided to defend the pawn, but kill the c4 pawn. Sorry, the c4 pawn, yes. It was a bad decision. The c4 pawn was so important because it's located in the bishop diagonal, stop the pawn of promote, give black some space in the center, and the h1 was not so useful. And apart, rook e6 is a passive move. It was better just to play active, or king d5 going forward, or yes, for example, h5, gives the pawn in this square, rook takes, and here king e5, trying to go to the center. Rook g5, for example, rook a6, just gives me running. And if rook g5, king f4, and just run with, for example, c3 was interesting to trade one pawn, especially to trade the a pawn, which is going to be the most dangerous. So rook e6 was a huge mistake, because specifically after bishop c4, rook g6, here rook g8 is winning. There is a concept to say that when you have rook and a bishop against a rook, it was better to maintain the rooks with the player who have the bishop to maintain the rooks to stop the pawns, because the bishop alone was so bad to stop pawns. So the bishop needs the help of a rook to stop the pawn. That's a well-known concept, but in the specific position, just rook g8 is just winning. But that's true that the black rook was so helpless to but helped so much the pawns. So in this specific position, rook takes, and now I believe that white is winning because has the a pass pawn protected by the b pass pawn. So now I believe that white here is winning, but of course it's not so easy to realize that in the end. And king e2, of course, was a little bit better than king 3 because it's not so f4 is not safe. Here you can do the same. But Niemann plays king 3, just trying to defend the pawn with the king. f4, king f2, there's not. It's true that the black rook is more active than the white rook, and it's going to be more dangerous, and specifically to make continued check and help the pawns, the rook was so annoying. The bishop is enough to defend the 3 against 0 with the help of the king, and then you can win the other side with the 2 pawns. Okay, here king d5 was better, b3 and now g3, king d1 and king d4. This was better for black. But okay, g3 still it's good to counterplay. It's still inequal. King d1, king d5, and here bishop e2 was the best move for white, but okay, it's not enough to win with a correct play. Okay, it was normal, king d4, bishop e2, c5, a4, and here comes the decisive mistake. Okay, then Niemann makes another error, but this mistake was so huge. Here Mishra plays c4, just giving the pawn after rook d8 and bishop c4. Best black play was just going to take the b2 pawn, and the rook is going to be so active in the second round because at the same time defend the a4 pawn in a2, and at the same time that he's going to promote number of takes and rook a2, he's stopping the a pawn and is active in the second round and is helping this pawn to advance or to make some continuous check. Looks like black can never lose in this position. So he plays instead of that c4, rook b6 looks also great. That's my favorite move here. That looks so easy apart. Just play the rook on e2 and everything is defending, and now the black, specifically the c1 is going to run, but you can advance his pawn with black, so it looks so difficult to lose this position. Okay, he plays instead of that c4, rook d1, c3. Now white is winning again. The evaluation has changed many times in the last few moves. Rook d8, king e3, bishop c4, f3. Mishra believes that only his queenside pawns are enough, but they are not enough. Rook d3, king e4, and here a5, another mistake of Niemann, who Mishra didn't play well against that. Now the black solution to make at the draw was h5. The idea is a6, h4. You cannot still pushing because f2 and h3. Wait, so with white you should play rook takes f3. And here instead of king f3, who after h7 is completely lost because you cannot play rook d8 or you cannot play rook a6. Here the best was rook takes a6, bishop takes king f5, and the king is in time to defend the pawn. After h3, bishop e7, king e3. Now just the king came in time, and you can never take on d3 because there is one pawn is going to fall, and for example, you try to defend both things at the same time, like bishop e7, king b6, bishop c3, king c5. Okay, you are now defending the h1 square with the bishop. You think that you can take, but no. I'm going to promote, and after you take, the pawn is hanging. So this move h5 will make a draw. Not here, and the decisive mistake who after that the Mira has no options to maintain the streak alive was d2. Because after here Mira started to make all the good moves to just take the full point. He plays rook d1 because now black is threatening f4 followed by d1. So Niemann plays d1, king e3, rook e1, good move, king f4. All the Niemann good moves are the best, and in some moments they are the only to win. Bishop d5, rook d5, and here great move, uh, transforming the position into a rook endgame. Bishop takes f3, king takes a rook e1, just having shot from behind, king e4, b4, good move, king d5, b5, not allowing the black king to gain to defend, king c5, and now b6, king c6, it looks like black have lost a tempo with king c5, king c6, but Niemann not allowed black to make all b1, king c6, rook c1, great move, rook c7, great, after a6, just black, white is threatening checkmate in the A rank, so black will defend, and now white is going to just take all the pawns. No takes, and here is just staying with the king, king with the king, king with the king. But you should pay attention because there are some hanging ideas. Hanging, yes, hanging, no, that one. Stalemate, sorry, not hanging, stalemate ideas. Okay, safe, and let's see how Niemann ends. Great move, rook c8, I really like this move. Rook takes b7. Here, if king e7, you cannot promote a queen because it's a stalemate, and we're taking with the rook too. So, but you can promote for knight or a bishop. And Niemann during the game he takes both pieces to be ready. The bishop and a knight to tell the other. I have some option, brother. But okay, after king b8, not take the rook, of course. King b6, great move. Rook c7 and a7, checkmate. A beautiful game of Hans Niemann, who has some mistakes, but because the game was also complicated. So the streak is over, like Undertaker versus Lesnar. The streak is over. So always was difficult, of course, to have a many games streak. So from 1 year to 71 games are so much before playing at this level. So congratulations for Abhimanyu Mishra to have this streak of 71 games, and congratulations to Niemann to break the streak. Niemann, Fabiano, and Wesley So are in the top of the youth champions. I recommend the fifth round of Fabiano Caruana too, and the best game of his day, but this day I decided to just comment today. So let's see how the tournament continues. Bye bye, motherfuckers.